This video is about applying information processing theory. Last video, I said the goal was to help students process and store information for future use. But how do we, as teachers, do that? First, you need to remember the executive functions, or how information is actually processed. When introducing information, make sure you have your students' attention and that they understand the terms and concepts that you're using. Also, encourage your students to use organization, elaboration, and visual imagery. You can help your students do this by giving examples and presenting information in an organized way. Also remember that according to this theory, learners are active and construct their own knowledge. Therefore, make sure your students are actively involved in your lessons. Also, you can help students organize information with advanced and graphic organizers. These can be in the form of outlines or a graphic like our learning theory graphic. You also want your students to learn in a meaningful way rather than on the surface. In this graphic, the surface level learning is above the yellow line. Trying to learn information by repeating it or simply memorizing it is not the most effective way to learn and be able to use that information later. Rather, a learner should focus on the deeper processing strategies I've already mentioned. Another way to help your students learn in a meaningful way is to use Bloom's revised taxonomy. Taxonomy simply means a way of categorizing something. So Bloom's categorizes levels of thinking. This is a graphic representation of Bloom's revised taxonomy. The 6 words around the outside are the different levels of thinking, starting with remember and moving clockwise in the order of thinking. For deeper, more meaningful learning to occur, we should focus on the top 3 levels: analyze, evaluate, and create. However, the bottom 3 levels of thinking can also be used. Other ways to use information processing theory are listed here. Memory aids, such as mnemonics, are types of elaboration or visual imagery. Overlearning is learning information past the point where it reaches the long-term memory. Automaticity comes from the ability to do something without consciously thinking about it. Metacognition is thinking about thinking, which helps students organize their thoughts and effectively process and store information. Lastly, you want to prevent cognitive overload. Since working memory is limited in space and duration, it's possible to try to put too much information in that memory store. There are strategies you can use as a teacher to avoid this cognitive overload. First, you can use chunking, which is combining separate pieces of information into one piece of information, such as instead of remembering 108, you can remember 108, which becomes one piece of information. Dual processing is when information is processed in more than one way, for example, visually and auditorily. This makes it easier to remember information. Automaticity helps because if a person does not have to consciously think about information, it does not take up space in the working memory, which saves space for other information. Distributed practice means spreading practice out over time rather than cramming information in all at once. Think time is a concept we will talk about more later in the semester, but it's the idea that you give your students time to process information before putting more information in.